It's 9:30 and I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the agenda be adopted and printed as circulated. Any issues with the agenda? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I apologize if I'm rusty today. It's been a while. I realized this morning I think it's been almost exactly 1 month since I chaired a meeting, so I think I know how to do it, but apologies in advance if I make an error. Having adopted the agenda, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? It's ominous. Not seeing any. Minutes. Moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the minutes from the July 3rd, 2024 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with those minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Long meeting today, probably, I think, 4 planning applications, 3 delegations. So we should probably get right down to it. And public meetings and drainage meetings. 6A, minor variance application A08-24. So moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that the council meeting be adjourned at 9:32 a.m. for the purposes of holding a public meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Planning Act. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And so now council is sitting as Committee of Adjustment to hear a minor variance application, and that is minor variance application A08-24. Spencer, I will turn it over to you to make your report to council.
Thank you, and good morning to council, staff, and members of the public joining us here this morning. The first application before the committee is application A08-24, and it affects property on 19th line, specifically the south side of 19th line at 27th line. Just immediately west of the CFFO headquarters. The application today seeks relief from 2 areas of relief, one applying to the maximum distance permitted between a principal dwelling and a proposed additional residential unit. There is a cap in the bylaw of 30 meters, 98 feet, and the applicant is proposing to go to 40 meters, approximately 131 feet. The second area of relief is relative to the gross floor area. So in the bylaw, it does cap gross floor area at either 1,506 square feet or 50% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever the lesser. So in this case, the proposed dwelling that the applicants are looking to purchase, it is a modular home, and it comes in at approximately 1,165 square feet. So that does represent approximately 64% of the gross floor area of the existing dwelling. So while it's less than the 1,506, it's still more than the 50%, which is the lesser of the 2. As a result of circulation, there were no comments received from neighboring residents. Similarly, there were no concerns raised by staff. I would note that the building department has been involved with the application and the applicant specifically prior to her making the application, and really just to discuss the modular home they were looking at buying, just to make sure it satisfies all of the various code requirements. It does do that, and as a result, the building staff have advised they have no objections to the application. Planning staff are satisfied that the proposal is an efficient use of land and does meet the intent behind the ARU provisions as contained in the Township bylaw. Therefore, we are recommending the application be approved today. And I would just note the applicant has provided a brochure from the modular home builder, and I will just hand that out to council just for information, as we do have more inquiries coming in about modular homes and factory-built homes. So I'll just share that with committee for information. Happy to answer any questions that committee may have.
Questions from Committee of Adjustment for the planner on the report? Is the applicant here? Do they wish to speak to their application? Would you like to speak to your application?
No, I just like to get it.
I appreciate your directness. Are there any members of the public here who wish to speak to this application? Not seeing any. Then I have moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the Township of Zorra Committee of Adjustment approve application file AO8-24 submitted by Sherry Landry and Wayne Tuffin for lands described as South Part Lot 6, Concession 3, North Oxford in the Township of Zorra, municipally known as 194425 19th line as it relates to 1. Relief from Table 5.4.2.4, provisions for detached additional residential units to I. Increase the maximum permitted distance between dwellings from 30 meters 98.6 feet to 40 meters 131.2 feet. 2. Relief from Table 5.4.2.3, provisions for all additional residential units to II. Increase the maximum permitted cumulative gross floor area from 50% of the gross floor area of the existing dwelling to 64% of the gross floor area to facilitate the establishment of a detached additional residential unit on a property zoned limited agricultural zone A1 in the Township of Zorra. Councillor Mitchell is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's something we've supported, and as the report says, it's minor, and I think we should approve it.
Councillor Finch is the seconder. Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So that is approved by the Committee of Adjustment. So now you're going to have to follow up then with probably best with Mike Hughes, Chief Building Official. Make sure that your I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and then you can proceed, okay? There you go. Got what you wanted. So having finished with minor variances, moved by Finch, seconded by... To hear the report. That's what I was saying before. So this has to come after. Oh, okay. Anyway, see, I told you I was rusty. I warned you all. Spencer. 6B, zone change application ZN 5-24-06.
Thank you, Mayor Ryan. The first application for zone change before council, ZN 5-2406, affects lands owned by Faircrest Farms Limited and 232-1215 Ontario Inc. And in this instance, the application is coming to council as a result of a related application for consent, which was just approved on August 1st by the County Land Division Committee, whereby the subject lands were part of a farm consolidation. So lands were severed and merged with an adjacent farm, thereby creating a larger farm parcel, and the applicant was looking to retain a parcel of just under 2 acres in size for an existing residential use. The only thing I would highlight in this report, aside from Land Division Committee approving the application, is just kind of how we got here and the configuration of the lot that was retained. So it is approximately double the minimum depth required, which would be 80 meters. It's approximately twice that and over 500 feet deep. And I know this council does speak often about preserving agricultural lands. So in this case, there is an accessory structure which exists at the back of the proposed rural residential lot. And historically, it has been kind of established as a built-up rural residential area, if you will. And staff did feel it was appropriate to include that accessory structure as part of the rural residential holding rather than retaining it as part of the farm consolidation. That's the only thing I would really highlight for council, but I'm happy to answer any questions they may have on this application.
Thanks, Spencer. Questions from council on their report? Is the applicant here and do they wish to speak to their application? Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Ryan Verhoog. I'm a lawyer at White Code. We represent the applicant. I'm speaking on behalf of the agent of the application, Gordon Klein. I have nothing further to add to this, to Spencer's comments.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant from council? Are there any members of the public here who wish to speak to the application? Not seeing any. We will move on to the next application, zone change application ZN 5-24-07.
Thank you, Mayor Ryan. The next application for zone change ZN 5-2407 affects property owned by 184-1729 Ontario Inc., locally known as Dewey's Automotive. And in this case, the current property does have split zoning on it, so there's two different highway commercial zones in place. What the applicant is proposing at this time is to eliminate one of those two zones, being the HC-7 zone, which is the closer of the two to the river. And in this case, what's happening is the applicant is proposing a future addition to the existing automotive shop. And as a result of that, there were discussions warranted between the applicant, his agent, and the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, given the proximity to the Middle Thames River. So a large portion of these lands are within the UTRCA's regulation limit. So there was a requirement as part of the HC7 holding zone that floodplain analysis, slope analysis, and that type of work as far as technical submissions was required prior to any new development occurring. The applicant, his agent from SPH Engineering, is here today to speak to that further if council wishes. But in general, the UTRCA has signed off as what we would call the new development limit on the property. They actually made the request that the portion generally outlined in blue be rezoned into the open space zone, in keeping with what zoning currently is in place for the majority of the Middle Thames River. And that would ensure that the applicant does maximize his current buildable portion while recognizing the constrained lands by placing them into the appropriate open space zone. The details about the addition itself are generally contained throughout the report. It is proposed at just under 3,000 square feet in size and will continue to serve the same purpose as the existing building, which is generally automotive work and custom repairs. As mentioned, the applicant is available, as is his agent, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Spencer. Questions from council on the report? Not seeing any. Is the applicant here, and do they wish to speak to their application? If you want to speak to your application, I'm going to ask you to just come up to the desk there and turn on the microphone. You or your agent is fine. Any questions for the applicant from council? Are there any members of the public here who wish to speak to the application? All right. On to the next application then, Spencer. Zone change application ZN5-24-07.
Thank you, Mayor.
No, sorry. We just did that one. ZN5-23-05.
Thank you, Mayor Ryan. The final application for zone change before council today is ZN 5-2305, property owned by Wallace and Thurkettle. In this instance, the applicants have applied for zone change, which would see them going from the general agricultural zone into the extractive zone, the ME zone. I would just highlight for council that as shown on the plate on the screen, it's really approximately half of the property that would be going into the extraction zone, while the balance of it would remain in the general agricultural zone. The applicants are proposing to extract below water table the existing aggregate resources which are found on the site. There is an existing aggregate operation to the immediate east, which is operated by the same operators who would be extracting from the subject lands. The other important aspect of this is that there's an existing haul road that is used by what's known as the Friel pit to the east, and that would be utilized by the applicant in this case for hauling the materials extracted from the subject lands. The other item I would highlight for council is just there was a lot of involvement between the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority and the applicant in working through the ARA process, given its proximity to the Thames. One of the things that did come of that as part of the submission for the ARA license was the need to take a close look at various buffers and incorporating different natural improvements, showing a net environmental gain as a result of all of this proposed extraction. There is a 30-meter buffer from the Thames proposed as well. There's a proposal for wetland creation. There's a small wetland pocket that would be removed through the extraction as a result. There is an incorporation of efforts to improve the existing conditions of that wetland as well as other natural features. I'd further note that while typically aggregate operations, particularly those which are feasible to return to an agricultural state, are required to do so, in this instance, given that the extraction is below water table, it does not appear feasible to reestablish the lands as agricultural. And in this case, it's largely proposed that the lands will remain as an open pit, which will be a pond, as part of the rehabilitation plan, which is shown on plate 7 for council's information. There's also some incorporation of meadows, pasture land, and wetland creation as well. As a result of circulation, staff do largely rely on the province and the provincial ministries for direction on these aggregate matters. Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Ministry of Environment, and similarly, ministry responsible for all things archaeological. So those things have been addressed, and the ministry has advised that of the, I think it was 56 technical comments that they had to work through, 54 have been addressed to date. There was one remaining aspect on the part of the CA, which has now been addressed, and one outstanding from OMAFRA, which will be addressed prior to the license being issued. I do know that Melanie Horton from Escher Planning, the agent on the file, is available online and can speak to any of the technical aspects of the application should council have questions of her. Otherwise, staff are supportive of the application today. Council will note that approval in principle is recommended at this time. Part of the reasoning for that, we are waiting on the associated mapping from the GIS team at the county. And secondly, we do wait for input from council should there be any discussion around the application if it needs addressed in the corresponding bylaw that will come forward. Happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you. Questions for Spencer on the report? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, just something I asked Spencer earlier, but just to clarify the process for replacing on, I'm trying to find the drawing number here. There's a municipal drain shown, actually two that wide together and then outlet into the Thames. What's the process for that being relocated as part of this aggregate pit operation?
Through the mayor, the municipal drains will have to be addressed to the satisfaction of the township prior to the license being issued. So those matters will be addressed by the applicant through Mike Hughes, Township Drainage Superintendent, prior to the license being finalized.
Anyone else? Question that just occurred to me, Spencer, as you were doing the report. You mentioned that there would be it's below water level, so there would be a remaining, pond and or wetland. The pond and wetland would not be directly connected to the river, though, correct?
That's correct. There would be a 30-meter offset between that open pond and the Thames River. Yeah. I would just note one further thing. I failed to mention that as a result of circulation, there was a call placed from a neighbor through to myself as well as Karen Martin at the township, and the neighbor did have some concerns about the proposed pit as well as some questions of the applicant. So if those haven't been addressed, I know the neighbor is here today and he's more than welcome to speak to his comments or concerns.
Any other questions for the planner on the report? Does the applicant wish to speak to their application?
Good morning, Mayor, members of council, and staff, and members of the public. My name is Melanie Horton. I'm with Escher Planning Incorporated and representing JR RUC on this application. I believe Jamie Martell may also be in the audience this morning, but I'd just like to thank Spencer for his thorough overview of the application and the process that we've undergone to this point. Just a couple of other items I'd like to add for your benefit is, as you may know, in addition to the zoning approval, the applicant will require a license approval from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. So there has been a fairly thorough review by the ministry, particularly focused on the site plans, and that is kind of the key operating document for aggregate sites in Ontario. The ministry has, over the past 4 to 5 years, I'll say, become much more rigorous and specific in the conditions that go on the site plans. And the reason for that is they want to ensure that all the conditions are enforceable and clearly laid out on the plans. These site plans in particular have a lot of detail around the wetland that will be created in the corridor between in 30-meter setback from the river and where the pit license will be. So there's a lot of detail you'll see on the site plans about the types of planting, the sequence of when things will happen, and the monitoring of those areas to ensure that they're healthy and create a net environmental benefit at the end of the life of the pit. I think Spencer's covered pretty much all the other technical items. In addition to this meeting, the applicant hosted a public information session under the Aggregate Resources Act. That was way back in January this year. We actually didn't have anybody attend. Notice of the application was sent under the Aggregate Resources Act by registered mail to landowners within 120 meters. And again, that was back in December of last year. So happy to answer any questions you may have, and thanks again for having us this morning.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant from council? Not seeing any. Are there any members of the public here who wish to speak to the application?
Well, yeah, I have
Hold on one second. Hold on a second. I'm just going to ask you to come up to the microphone, and if you haven't signed in already, I'll ask you to sign in on your way out. Okay, so just hit the button there to turn your microphone on, and then everybody can hear you. And I need you to just, before you speak, I need you to just state your name for the record.
Okay. Okay, my name is Ian Friel. I live next door to the Wallace. Okay, I'm next door to the Wallace pit. I have some concerns possibly with the municipal drain. I think they were kind of answered here. I didn't know whether they're going to get involved in this but it runs right through the property, right below where he's going to excavate, I would assume. I'm not sure. It's hard for me to tell. What if they would damage it? They're going to have trucks and heavy equipment running over it, I would imagine, and it could be damaged, and we've had problems with it before. With roots in it, and we had to dig it up and replace part of it in our property, but I'm concerned about that. And who's going to answer that for me?
We will. We will.
Yeah.
That's what this is for today, exactly to address concerns like that. So I think Councillor Stewart asked the question preliminarily, but I mean, in addition to that, I think I would say at a high level, like municipal drain is the responsibility of the municipality, and we'll look after that drain, right? That's our responsibility on behalf of taxpayers.
I was under the impression that we had to look after ourselves.
Well, look after means that it's done right. Doesn't necessarily say who does the work. But I'll turn the question over to Director of the Manager of Drainage, Mike Hughes, and let him to answer the details on that.
And we had issues with the willow trees getting into the pipes, and actually plugged it right up. So we had to dig it all up and clean it all out and put new pipes in, which we did ourselves, which I'm very fortunate that I have a son and a grandson who have construction knowledge, and my grandson is a operator, so he does well with the excavators and whatnot. But I don't have any objection to them having a gravel pit in their backyard. I wouldn't do it myself, but you drive down the highway and you look over to the river. It's a natural, beautiful place to look at down there. It's almost like a picture postcard, and I hate to see that get tore up, but I can't exactly tell from where the gravel pit is going to be. You know, it's hard for me to imagine where it's going to be, how close to the floodplain it is, and no one's ever explained that to me.
Did you take a look at the drawings that are in the agenda?
Yes,
today?
but it's pretty hard to envision with the drawings. But and I don't like to see them digging down. They're so close to the river, and you don't want to ruin the river, and the flood gets up there. We've had some terrible rains this year, and really things have flooded up bad. It got pretty high in the fields down there too, and like I have river bottom too, and mine's not near as nice as theirs because I got a lot of weeds and it's hard to maintain it. But and I also have an issue with dust control. Who actually owns the road that you sold?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember who purchased it, but staff know who purchased? A-Rock? A-Rock,
A-Rock owns it?
yeah.
Well, I was confronted by Mr. Wallace the other day. He said he owned it.
They own part of it.
Well,
Sold to
he
both.
came up and tells me that his fence is gonna come right up to my fence, and he's cutting the access to my one driveway right off. He owns maybe 10 square feet in there.
So that's not relevant to the aggregate, the zone change for the aggregate application today, though, right? Private property matters between two adjacent property owners or between those people, and not relevant to this zone change for an aggregate license.
Well, it's hard relative to me if I can't get out of my driveway.
Yeah, but we're not hearing today
Okay,
whether that
I understand
driveway,
that.
that's not part of the application in front of us as to
Okay.
where a driveway, what property lines it does or doesn't cross. Council's not considering that today. I mean, you know, however you choose to proceed, that doesn't mean that it won't end up in front of council, but that's certainly not what's being considered today. The application today is a zone change to support the aggregate application and nothing to do with fences or driveways or private property between two, you know, private
How
property
do I
owners.
confront that?
Well, I would suggest that you don't confront anything. I would suggest that you talk with your neighbor, but I mean, it's not up to me to tell any two neighbors how they talk to each other about disputes
Oh, yeah.
between the two of them. I always say to residents, if you want to get me involved in your property dispute with your neighbor, think really carefully about it, because once you invite your politician or your councillor in, it's really hard to get them out, and you might not like it once they're in.
There's no real dispute with it, like he's not stopped me yet, so, but, well, and then the other problem I had would be dust control on the road, but that's gonna be another issue other than what we're discussing today, is that,
Dust control is to some extent regulated under the Aggregate Act and their license, but that's a private property matter for the applicant who owns and operates the pit, because obviously there's no township road, right, that's going to have a dust suppressant issue, right? The one municipal road that's there is county, not township. County had no concerns expressed on the application. So the dust suppression will be for the responsibility of the property owner and the operator of the aggregate pit.
so I'm trying to figure out who the operator is, A-Rock?
Correct.
So I discuss it with them?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, yes, okay. I guess I don't have any other issues. My issues are probably apart from the application for the pit, but I don't really oppose it, but I don't understand why you would want one there, but.
Lots of people do lots of things with their property that we wouldn't all do with their
Yeah,
property.
right.
It's up to every one of us, and I'm always cautious of, you know, council has a responsibility to regulate land use, but we need to be very careful about how we do that, because lots of people live in ways that I wouldn't want to live. That doesn't mean that they're wrong to live that way. You know, but that's why we have this process today, right? That's why people have to go through this planning process, and neighbors are notified, and we have a public process like today where people can come like you and ask those questions and get those answers.
Yeah.
And it's all transparent, and everybody knows how they're going to be affected, whether individual people like how they're affected or not. It's transparent, and the maps are here, and council can ask questions on their behalf of all of our staff and get those answers, so.
Well, I guess I have no other issues.
Spencer?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ryan. Just to address the concern and comment with respect to proximity to the Thames River, I do understand what Mr. Friel is saying with respect to this is an absolutely picturesque area. It's beautiful, as are many of the areas where this aggregate extraction does occur. But as far as the interaction with Upper Thames and the applicant, that had gone on for approximately 2 years before they arrived at satisfactory responses from the applicant. So I just want to emphasize that this is not a matter of an application is submitted and it was just a token gesture to circulate the CA. The CA had a lot of very direct involvement, not just with respect to the proximity to the Thames, but for the establishment of new wetland areas, for the proposed rehabilitation plan of the open pond, also for just the extent of the extraction itself. The Upper Thames did provide technical comments. Some of those were addressed directly by Melanie Horton through Escher Planning. And as a result of we'll call it 2 years of back and forth, you're seeing the best version of the site plan that is seeking approval through the appropriate licensing process compared to when it was first made. So there was a lot of involvement between the CA and the applicant to address these issues.
Anything else for us?
I'm good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other members of the public here who wish to speak to the application? Not seeing any then. That's the last one of those. So now, moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that pursuant to the Planning Act, the public meeting be adjourned at 10 a.m. and the regular meeting of council be called back to order. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And with respect to minor variance application A08-24, moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approve in principle the zone change application ZN5-24-06 submitted by Faircrest Farms Limited and 2321215 Ontario Incorporated, whereby the retained lands resulting from consent application B24-37-5 and described as Part Lot 9, Concession 2, North Oxford, Township of Zorra, are to be rezoned from General Agricultural Zone A2 to Rural Residential Zone RR for the purpose of fulfilling a condition of the associated application for consent. Councillor Mitchell, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, this is straightforward. Farm consolidation, preservation of a rural residential property, which is we would prefer rather than having that house tore down. I think the only question was, as Spencer referred to, is the depth of the lot to accommodate the additional structure, and I think that makes sense that additional structure is much more useful for the people living in the rural residential lot than it would be for the adjoining farm. So it makes sense to rather have that building tore down that we preserve it for the use of whoever lives in this property. So I think we should approve the application.
Councillor Finch is the seconder. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And then zone change application ZN5-24-07, moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approve the zone change application ZN5-24-07 submitted by SPH Engineering, care of Corby Kerwin, to rezone the subject lands described as lots 1, 2, and 3, registered plan number 105 and municipally known as 105 Milton Street, Thamesford, to Special Highway Commercial HC6 zone and Open Space OS zone, respectively, to recognize the existing use, automotive repair garage, and facilitate a future addition generally as described in report number 2024-262. Councillor Mitchell, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
It's good to see a local business that's succeeding to the point that they're contemplating an expansion to their facilities, and I think it's good planning to change the zoning around so it's clear what is suitable for the business and what land is going to be preserved for natural area along the Upper Thames. So congratulations to Dewey's for their success and best luck in their expansion. And once again, I think we should approve the application.
Councillor Finch is the seconder. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And finally, zone change application ZN5-23-05, moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that the Council of the Township of Zorra approve in principle the zone change application ZN5-23-05 submitted by Timothy and Kim Wallace, Alan and Jessica Thurkettle, whereby the lands described as Part Lot 3 and 4, Concession 10, East Missouri, Township of Zorra, are to be rezoned from General Agricultural Zone A2 to Special General Agricultural Zone A2 Special and Agri-Industrial Zone ME to permit a new Category 1 Class A pit above and below water table aggregate operation and to recognize the existing dwelling, buildings, and agricultural operation on the subject lands. Councillor Mitchell is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, creation of a new aggregate pit is always a bit controversial, but it's important not only for development of the province and the local area, but we have a report further on in our agenda that outlines how important it is to the Township of Zorra in several different ways. Spencer identified that there was 56 conditions that had to be met, and so far 54 of them have been met, and the other 2 are in the process of being approved. And so The applicants have jumped through a lot of hoops already to get this. I don't think this is any surprise to council that this was going to be developed right across the now private road from an existing pit. And so once again, I think we should support the application.
Councillor Finch is the seconder. Is there any other discussion? Yeah, I mean, I support the application. The I's have been dotted, the T's have been crossed. It complies with all the relevant policies. But I still have concerns that this council has expressed in the past through TAPMO and to the province about how these things are done. And that my main concern here is, in this case, is like the general environmental sensitivity of the area, notwithstanding Upper Thames' extensive involvement in it, and that these pits can be open, in theory, for decades. Right? That's my concern, is why can't the province, and I think TAPMO needs to, Zorra working through TAPMO, for those of you here, TAPMO is the top aggregate producing municipalities in Ontario, of which Zorra is usually, this year we are again in our customary position of being the 6th largest in all of Ontario producer of aggregate, is that I think some of these things should be, the part of the license should be, get your license, get the aggregate out, and rehabilitate it. Done. But as we know, in this township alone, there are quarries that are open, pits and quarries that are open for decades and decades and decades. And while, when you look at it in the context of that application and that pit alone, it may not be that big a deal, but for the residents who live near it, and in the context of rehabbing something, it can go for decades without being rehabbed and of being of no use to anybody because the aggregate isn't being extracted. That being said, the applicant has complied with all the relevant policies that are here, and there's no reason not to approve this application. But I did want to raise that concern because, we could ask the applicant, how long do you plan to extract from this? Well, how long is the impact going to be on neighbors? I didn't, because it doesn't really matter what the applicant says, because there's no way to hold an applicant to that under current provincial legislation under the Aggregate Resources Act. But anyway, I felt I couldn't support it without expressing those concerns. So having done that, is there any other comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So to all the zone changes that we just approved, I would suggest that you follow up with Spencer and or Mike, and they will make sure that you, again, have your I's dotted and your T's crossed before you proceed with any work on the property, and make sure it's in compliance with the various conditions that were laid out in the approved applications here today. Okay? And then we will go on to delegations. And the first delegation, 7A, is from Bryan Smith regarding ReuseapalooZaha. And Bryan, I'll ask you to come up and hit the button, make sure the little red light is on, and I will turn it over to you.
There we are. Thank you. Congratulations on the pronunciation exercise. I often fail at pronouncing that invented word. So you've seen the slideshow, and I'm sure that you've noticed that it's short, and I will attempt to be short because I know you have a long agenda, and I know that many of you are familiar with the event and so know most about it. So do I have a way of advancing the slideshow from here? Or that's you. Okay. I will just say, please forward then. How about that? Good. Okay. Good. All right. So just as relates to this first slide, so the event that we're talking about is on September the 28th. It runs in the morning, and we have booked the Embro Community Center. It's a giant waste diversion project. It is a zero waste event. It's also a social event. And it's an introduction for many of the attendees to other community organizations like Goodwill, Transition Less Waste, Victoria's Quilts, if you're familiar with them, who take new and scrap fabric and make quilts for cancer patients to provide them warmth and comfort while they're under treatment. So it's an introduction to those people, to all of those organizations. So I think it really is a good thing in the way that it builds community. This will be the 10th year of Reusapaloozas. Most years we've done 2 a year. In some ambitious years, we've done as many as 4 in a year. And we've had previous visits to Zorra with them. It is a migratory bird. It works its way around Oxford County, and it works its way around with local collaboration. So If I take Zorra examples, collaborations with 4-H locally, with the folks who are helping Ukrainians, with the Thamesford Lions, with the pipe band, all of those collaborations generating cash for those groups to help them do the work that they do. And I should mention a collaboration that we will renew with the Embro Fair, where they will shift books from their book sale to us at the conclusion of their event, meaning that you should buy lots of them so we have less to deal with at our event. Next slide, please. So at a ReuseapalooZaha, we get lots of interesting things happening, including intergenerational contacts, including hours for teens that we can sign off on if they provide us assistance during it, including goods for teams. We bribe them with anything they want, and we give them gratitude, and teens, I think, need that. I think adults need that too. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I've quoted some familiar words, meaningful words that are from your township plan to show some of the correlations between what we're doing with this event and what the township does. Just pointing out as well that one of the things that we work at as well is sponsoring some entrepreneurs. So we have some entrepreneurial folks helping out as well, and in the sense that some large furniture disappears from our site, and instead of going to become wood pulp, becomes refinished furniture, and that metal goods frequently leave and turn into money for various things. And I do have a plan, and I'm hoping it will play out, that we will move that metal in future back to what we did before. We used to synchronize with the Thamesford Lions Club when they did a metal collection, and metal from both sites would then go to their metal collection. That sort of got lost in those years, whose initials start with C, that we don't want to think about, but we're going to sort that back out again. And I think I mentioned that there are certain things in that event that help the arts and cultural community, and we've had interest from not just quilters in that. And so that would be what I would have to say about that slide, and I'll ask for the next one, please. So our requests are fairly simple. And possibly the second and third one are a bit cheeky. But the first one is that you waive the fee for the use of the room and the kitchen for the event. Please and thank you. And then you're obviously welcome to come. You get the same price on the goods as everybody else. It's all free. And we invite you to bring friends, but not leave them behind at the end. And thank you. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be pleased to try to clarify anything that I wasn't clear on, or to answer a question that I hadn't thought to address.
Thank you. Questions from council? Not seeing any. Just trying to check something in your presentation there, because I think, yeah, nice choice of car on slide 5 there.
Well, it was the model somewhat better than the one I drive.
Yeah.
And I noted the roof racks would allow persons who own that vehicle to move lots of goods home with them.
So then I have moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that council support the fee waiver for the ReuseapalooZaha for the cost of the room at the Embro Zorra Community Center for September 28th, 2024. Councillor Mitchell is the mover.
It's well known how much I don't like to give up potential revenue, but I looked it up and it's $156 to rent the large hall and kitchen for 5 hours. So I think the benefit outweighs is going to be considerably more than $156. So I support that we waive the fee for ReuseapalooZaha. Did I get it, Bryan?
Aha.
Thank you.
Councillor Finch.
I'm happy to support waiving the fee as well.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Gray.
I typically like to see policy framework address these types of requests, and so I reference back to the policy to see in which ways this was aligned and in which ways it was different. I think the request today is far closer to the intention of the policy, with only very small criteria that was not met. But when I look at our strategic plan and what we try to achieve as a municipality, this is an event that that aligns with that very closely. In our core values, we have teamwork. We will work cooperatively at all levels of the organization and community to accomplish the township's objectives and to provide our residents with quality service. And I think this absolutely does that. We talk often about how it's difficult for municipal government to be all of the things that we set out to be, and it takes volunteerism from residents and community groups to step forward and fill some of those gaps. So I'm in full support of waiving the fee because ReuseapalooZaha provides for us a lot of what we are not currently accomplishing on our own. I really like in your presentation how you highlight not only the environmental impact of events like this, but the social component, which is also a challenge for municipal government to help, endorse vibrant community, and it's groups like yours and people like you that are able to do that for us. So I'm in full support of that. And as we move forward, these policy frameworks, we review them on a regular basis every 5 or so years. So there may be opportunities in the future to tweak the policy that something like this could just be accepted through that process. But in the meantime, thank you for coming forward and requesting for this fee waiver so that you are able to continue running these as a migratory bird program around the county.
Anyone else? I remember the first time I went to ReuseapalooZaha in Embro, it would have been, 2015, maybe 16, and I rocked up with my minivan and 2 little kids, and the van was full, and I opened the doors and went to unload, and people came and started unloading, and I thought, how wonderful, volunteers are here unloading my van for me. They were not volunteers, they just took that stuff, which normally would be alarming, but but that's the whole intent, right? They just took the stuff and they walked off to their car and put it in, and I drove away after 5 minutes. Van was completely empty. It didn't even make it inside the hall, it was just gone. Mm-hmm. And I think, especially in the context of a municipality and a group of municipalities that said no to a landfill because we thought it was bad to bury our waste in the ground, this is exactly the kind of initiative that we need to be continually supporting, that absolutely diverts waste from going into a landfill. Indirectly, this saves us, not the Township of Zorra, but Oxford County residents money, because these are things that now don't have to go into the landfill and be pushed around and covered up, and it leaves space for the other things that do have to go in. 2 levels of municipal government working together is not a bad thing, and I think that this is a really easy one for council to get behind. Though I agree with the deputy mayor's comments that I would like to see us sort of just change policy so that you can just not spend your time coming. Not that you're not welcome to come in, but you don't have to spend your time preparing a delegation. You can just submit the thing, get the approval, and go on with promoting and running the event, and utilize the volunteers' time where it's more valuable. Anybody else before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you.
My thanks to all of you.
And I think if you need any details on that, Sophia will look after you and make it all happen. And Delegation 7B, Diane Harris, Domestic Abuse Resource Team, Oxford Purple Bench Project. Diane, I'll ask you to come up and take a seat there and make sure the little red light is on when you're talking, and I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. I'm here with regards to the Purple Bench to honor the memories of those who have died by femicide. Numerous municipalities across Ontario, including this one, have declared gender-based violence an epidemic, and to assist in a memorial project that will bring prevention and awareness to the subject. This memorial project began in 2015 to honor the memory of Barbara Bailey from Spryfield, Nova Scotia. Barbara frequented parks and found solace in sitting on benches to escape her abusive husband. Tragically, on October 19th, 1990, after enduring years of abuse, Barbara's husband of 25 years strangled her to death in their home, leaving behind 5 children without a mother. These benches serve as more than just seats. They feature plaques displaying emergency contact numbers for individuals experiencing domestic violence. They have been strategically placed in various locations to raise awareness and provide resources to those in need. DART Oxford has been very fortunate to receive a donor who has purchased 8 of these benches, and they come in at a cost of $1,855 plus HST. So you can see that this donor really stands behind this project, and we're honored to have received that. Why I'm here today is to request that the municipality of Zorra help us with the commitment to prevention and awareness of gender-based violence. One, by selecting a location for this bench near a bustling area, near a municipal building, such as this one is so beautiful, and I got to see it today. I didn't even realize it was here. It's beautiful. Prepare a cement pad for the bench to sit on so it could be secure, and maintain this bench as you do with other benches that you have in your municipality. I'm estimating that a cement slab to sit on, if it was required, would be in around $250 to $300, and I don't know how much it costs to maintain it going forward. That would be up to your parks. But I'm just asking, I did bring a picture because I received it just yesterday, that's what the bench will look like. And it's in a royal blue lilac color, so it won't be, it's quite beautiful. And the plaque will be in the middle, and it will be saying to honor all victims of survivors of gender-based violence. And for support, then you can scan the QR code for the numbers near you. Thank you.
Questions from council? Councillor Mitchell.
So the original project was to honor this Barbara Bailey as a memorial, but from what you just said, there are no individual names going on these benches. That just says to honor all.
Yeah, this memorial project was brought up on behalf of her memory.
Okay.
So there's so many names, we would be able to afford to put them all on. So
unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah. And I have a question for staff related to, and Steve, would we be able to tie this in with some sidewalk or curb work if we needed a concrete pad for this?
Yes, absolutely. We've always got, in the fall of the year, some sidewalk repair jobs to do, and we can absolutely tie this in.
Yeah, we don't want to pay the extra charge of 1 meter of concrete.
You're not wrong.
Anyone else? Councillor Finch.
Do you know where the other 7 benches you're planning to put them?
I have heard that there's going to be a few that are going by the municipal building. Others are in parks, but I don't have that confirmed.
Anyone else? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that Zorra Council support receiving the donation of the Purple Bench and direct staff to work with representatives from Domestic Abuse Resource Team to select a location and prepare a surface if needed for it to be installed on, and that any costs for surface come from the sidewalks budget, and that the Domestic Abuse Resource Team forward any communication around the project for staff to share to the community, and that this resolution be forwarded to Oxford County and its area municipalities. Deputy Mayor Grigg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
So typically when we have residents come forward with requests that have financial implication, we like to align it with our budget process because it's difficult to do work that we haven't taxed members of the municipality for. So it's resources that we don't have. So in the motion, I have requested that the funds for a cement pad come from our sidewalk budget because that's work that has not yet to be done. And in my mind, if it's 1 extra slab of sidewalk to secure this bench, that's well worth deviating from our regular process and schedule to make this happen. The project originated because of one specific memorial case, but I follow DART on social media, and I see the updates from across the province of the women and children that are lost to gender-based violence and femicide in a shocking rate. We've had some of these conversations
Yes.
around this table and around the county, and I think, you know, I'm grateful to news agencies and organizations like yours that are using this terminology so that when these funerals are being held, that it is very clear what has happened to these women and to children. So the bench project is a wonderful, it originated from a wonderful place of trying to respond not just to honor memory, but as a tool to help connect people to resources. I'm incredibly grateful to the donor of the benches. I'm incredibly grateful to you and to DART for bringing this forward. And I think staff can work to ensure that the location, you know, that doesn't need to be a conversation of us as politicians. Our staff are well-versed in where those locations could be and how to get this done. So the direction is for them to work with you. And then the other piece was just around any kind of communication. So in the package, there was some good information around what the program is about. We've got a great social media presence as well. So any information that would be of benefit to the initiative, that just forward it to our staff, and then we'll make sure that we're able to, provided this passes, sorry,
Yeah.
that we'll be able to get that out to the public. And yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Councillor Mitchell is the seconder.
Yeah, I just want to agree with everything that Deputy Mayor just said, and I think in addition to being a memorial bench, what really sold it for me was the fact that there was contact information for anybody that is in that situation, and you don't know when people are desperate to escape from these situations where they will find the information that they need to get help. So that component of it was, I'm going to support it anyway, but that's what sealed the deal for me. So I support the motion put forward by the Deputy Mayor that we approve this project.
Anyone else? I feel, you know, slightly guilty, and I'm not going to lie, I told Diane a couple of weeks ago, traumatized by some of the things that I've learned in my role on Oxford County Council about this issue. Oxford County keeps a list called the by name list, which is anybody in Oxford County who is homeless or precariously housed, they can put their name on that list, and that means that they will be in line for various consideration for various different options for housing. There's a group of the population who is in that situation but doesn't put their name on the by list for a variety of reasons. Some people are, you know, self-conscious about it, they're concerned about privacy even though it's not a public list, other reasons. And I remember being on a tour at Ingamo a year and a half ago with Diane and our various co-workers at DART and DASO and Ingamo, and they told me something that was horrifying to me. Maybe other people know it, but to me it was really eye-opening. There's a group of people that live in Oxford, predominantly women, who are not on the by name list because they choose to solve their housing solution by accepting that that night they will be mentally, physically, or sexually abused. So they stay in that home. So tonight, me and my kids are warm and dry, but I'm gonna have to accept that. And this bench, you know, when Diane met with me a few weeks ago about this, this bench, exactly as you said, Councillor Mitchell, you know, has that information right on there so that somebody who we will never know is experiencing that, because it's none of our business if they don't want to tell us, has the opportunity to scan that thing and access services that they didn't even know existed. What does this thing tell me? I don't know. I'll find out. And then I am 100% confident that once they reach, you know, the resources that are available, they will have opportunities that they didn't have before. So I think the trivial cost of this will show up obviously for the person who, you know, as value for the person who uses it, but for the rest of us as a community, as a society, it will just be multiplied throughout. 100% support doing this. Anybody else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have another delegation coming up at 11 o'clock. It's not 11 and they're not here. I'm going to suggest that maybe we take like 10 minutes and then we come back and start with reports from staff, and then at 11 we'll switch over to that last delegation if council's okay with that. We'll take a 10-minute break, so we'll come back at 10:40. 10:42, I'll call the meeting back to order, and we will start with reports from the Public Services Department until we get to 11 o'clock in that last delegation. 8.1, Roads Division, Report 2024-090 from the Director of Public Services regarding Roads Division monthly departmental report. Steve, is there anything you want to highlight for council?
No, nothing to highlight. Open for questions.
Questions from council? Took my eye out. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2024-090 from the Director of Public Services be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? Only comment I wanted to make was a great job with all the torrential downpours that we get nowadays, never 5 or 10 or 15 millimeters, 20, 30, 40, I don't know, 50. 60 millimeters at a time, and all the washouts, and I know that diverts a lot of resources from projects and disrupts everybody's days, but our roads have been largely, open and functioning, and that's, I know that's been really challenging, probably to some extent our new normal. But thanks on behalf of residents. I would also share something I shared with Steve yesterday with council and anybody watching. I was at a private event 3 weeks ago, I guess, and two people who are not residents of Zorra, but who drive trucks around southwestern Ontario all over the place. The first person said to me, "Hey, you're the mayor," and I thought, okay, here we go. And he said to me, "Zorra has the best roads of wherever I drive my truck." He said, wherever he drives a truck, he said, you can tell as soon as you cross the line, those are the best roads. And then his buddy arrived at the party, and he leaned over and told him, "Hey, that's the mayor." And I thought, okay, here we go. And he said the same thing. So two people, unsolicited, offered their compliments on our roads. So I passed that on to Steve and encouraged him to pass it on to staff yesterday, because, of course, they deserve the credit for doing all that work, and they advise us of what our roads need, and we just give them the budget and they do that work. So I know we all know how rare that is, that somebody just comes up to you and tells you how good your municipal government is doing. So I think we need to hold on to that. So Steve.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to the crew for sure. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if a trucker says it, it must be true.
Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that report 2024-090 from the Director of Public Services be received and filed for information purposes only. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 8.2, Recreation and Facilities Division. Report 2024-054 from the Manager of Recreation and Facilities regarding monthly departmental activities. Sophia, is there anything you want to highlight for council?
Yes, I'll highlight two things. Firstly, it's just an edit to the report. I did state that the Embro minor ball batting cage is complete. It is nearing completion. They're just waiting on a few parts to complete the roof. So just to draw attention to that. And secondly, at this halfway point in the summer, I wanted to acknowledge our seasonal staff who have all been working very hard in our pool, in our camp, and in our parks. Ali and I have not only witnessed exceptional programming ourselves and relationship building between staff and the parents and our participants, but we've also received very positive feedback on their experiences with us throughout the summer through our satisfaction survey and by email and in person at drop-off and pickup. So with that, I wanted to give a big thank you to our camp coordinator, Taylor, and our returning pool supervisor, Fiona, for providing exceptional leadership to their teams, as well as a shout out to our facility staff who have been mentoring our summer park students throughout the summer. So just wanted to take a moment to give some staff appreciation.
Thank you. Questions from council? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that report 2024-054 from the Manager of Recreation and Facilities be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9, reports from Corporate and Protective Services Department. 9.1, Emergency Services, report 2024-091 from the Fire Chief regarding emergency services for June 16 to July 15. Josh, is there anything you want to highlight for council?
Two things very quickly. Number one, I just wanted to congratulate our recruits. We had 100% success rate this year with our recruit class. Everybody got through, and they looked mighty fine getting their certificates. Another thing I just want to do very quickly is read a quick email that I received from Matthew Hopkins, our Deputy District Chief out of Uniondale. This arrived to me July 17th. Good morning, Chief. Last night at approximately 013500 hours, Uniondale Station was dispatched to a motor vehicle rescue which involved a young male driver who was trapped in a sinking vehicle. District Chief Matheson was first to arrive. His quick thinking is likely the reason that the young man is alive today. The vehicle was 90% submerged when Chief Matheson arrived. The male had limited breathing air left. DC Matheson used a wrench from his vehicle to break out the back window and pulled the driver out as he could not wait any longer. I feel Scott should be recognized for his actions, or at the very least, shared with council for his efforts, and I tend to agree. So I just wanted to thank Chief Matheson for that, and yeah, thank you for listening.
Questions from council? Councillor Mitchell.
Just follow up what you just said, and I know both Matt and Scott well, so it doesn't surprise me that they perform that way under that type of situation. I know there are provincial and possibly national programs that recognize people that do above and beyond bravery and those sort of things. Is this something we can look into for possibly having District Chief Matheson recognized for his extraordinary efforts?
I would absolutely be happy to do that.
And I think council would support any action you did on that.
I was going to follow up and say, let us know if you need anything from council to support that and bring it to us.
Comment on the report itself, and that was I was glad to see the renegotiation of the automatic aid with Southwest Oxford. That's been one of my pet projects for a long time, is that people are served by the closest fire hall, and in order to do that, we've had this automatic aid, but the automatic aid has to be fair to the other parties, and I applaud updating it so that when on the rare occasion we do need their help, that they are reimbursed fairly. Two questions on the change from RIFSOC training to the Ontario Fire Marshal Regional Training Center models. RIFSOC has been amazingly successful over the last decade. So in a way, I'm sad to see that RIFSOC itself will be ending, but glad to see that the new model is in place. Two questions. We do have a shared training officer between the five rural municipalities. How will her role change now that we're moving over to more of a OFM guided training program?
So many of her existing duties will stay the same, administratively dealing with the certification bodies, and then implementing logistics, things of that nature. One thing that we won't have to do, and that she's been taking the brunt of, is we won't have to write our own educational materials anymore. So we're hoping that there will be a little bit more time for her so that we can assign things to get ahead of the curve a little bit. A really good example is EV vehicles and batteries are becoming more and more of an issue in our organization and for firefighters across the country and around the world. We can now have a little bit more time spent on the development of specific courses for things like this, as opposed to revamping the NFPA 1001, which is something that every other department is doing every couple of years as that curriculum updates. So I'm very excited to see what potential comes of that and what we can make. Yeah.
And related question is, during the RIFSAT training courses, specifically with the recruit training, many of our station firefighters and officers have been involved in as either leading training or as support people. What role will they still be able to play in the new system?
So in this new system, they will have to be, they'll have to apply to become adjunct instructors for the province so that the province can pay them, which is a nice bonus.
Yeah.
But that's the only, that's going to be the only hurdle that they have to come over or overcome in order to basically do the same job that they were doing before. And we'll have a larger instructor pool to pull from when we need.
And my last question, and I apologize I didn't send this before, but you just talked about the province paying. Do we have any idea impact on budget of this change?
This change is going to keep the budget the same or reduce it. We're not creating any new infrastructure. I'm not here asking for any money for this purpose. The paying of the instructors moves over to the OFC. We shouldn't see any further incurred costs.
Okay, we'll remember that in November, Chief.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for the chief? Moved by Greg, seconded by Stewart. That council approve the amendments to bylaw 16-18, the clean and clear bylaw, to include fire hydrant provisions. That council authorize the execution of an updated automatic aid agreement between the Corporation of the Township of Zorra and the Corporation of the Township of Southwest Oxford, and that the township clerk be authorized to execute the emergency services training and registration agreement between the Ontario Fire College and the Corporation of the Township of Norwich on behalf of the Rural Fire Services of Oxford County, Norwich, Blandford Blenheim, East Zorra, Tavistock, Zorra, Southwest Oxford, to establish a regional training centre. Deputy Mayor Grigg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that? Councillor Stewart? Any other discussion? The only comment I would make is I think this is one of those examples when residents say to us, where's the efficiency in municipal government? It's right there. Better training for no more dollars. So I think we need to make sort of a note of that when it comes to budget time to say, in this budget, let's not forget and take it for granted. We have implemented now, not by our own design, but we've made a silk purse out of a sow's ear, and we are now going to have more effective training for no more money. There's the efficiencies, because one of the challenges I always have with explaining the efficiencies to residents is sometimes it doesn't show up because it was efficient, because you didn't, it's hard to tell people the money you didn't spend, but here's a specific example of money we are not spending but are going to get a higher level of training. We need to make a note of that come budget time, that we've achieved something in this budget, a higher level of service without spending more dollars. So congratulations to staff on that. Thank you. Any other discussion before I call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9.2, building drainage and bylaw services. Mike, is there anything you want to highlight in that report?
No, thanks.
Questions from council? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that report 2024-086 from the Chief Building Official Drainage Superintendent be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9.3, financial services, nothing. And 9.4, legislative services, report 2024-088 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding interim 2023 aggregate production statistics. Dawn, is there anything you want to highlight for council?
Questions from council?
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Either for Don or Diane, when do we get this money? Does it get sent? Do we have the $759,000 now, or how long does it take for the government to transfer the money to us?
We haven't seen it come in yet. They usually send it in once at one time, and it's usually in the third quarter of the next year.
So we have that money in hand by the time budget considerations?
Yes, we should.
Okay.
Anyone else? So I guess Yeah. The question that I have, like, we're in our customary position number 6 there, and the royalties are up because a few years ago we, through TAPMO, got that royalty raised, and they're up because production is up. I guess the question, though, is, when production is up, that means we get more money, but it also means more trucks on our roads. And I'm wondering, do we have a way on an ongoing basis, either us or in partnership with TAPMO, of assessing how much of these royalties actually offset the increased demands for our infrastructure? And it's not. I'm certainly not expecting a dollar value question or a percentage answer to that today. But is that something that we can work on either as a township or with TAPMO to try and figure that out, right? Because that's always the answer from the industry in the province is you get these royalties, that offsets that, but we don't know if that's actually true.
We'd have to come back to that with some more information on exactly what percentage it would cover.
I'm not necessarily suggesting that it'd be Zorra that does that work. I mean, with TAPMO, there's a whole bunch of partners, and I just think that's something that we should look into with them. And it can be an example. Some of that work's been done before, but it's been. I think that's where this is going to come down to between this and the property tax assessment is this is money, which is good. But if we spend more than that to get it, then it's bad. And I think we need to know exactly. A lot of residents will look at this and say, well, you got millions of dollars. Well, yeah, but how much extra time did our staff spend on those roads? How much sooner did we have to rebuild those roads in order to do this? I think we need to know that, right? Otherwise, because residents sort of assume that, well, the township makes loads of money off those pits.
Steve did some of this work a year and a half ago when we were looking at line 29 and the issues with all the gravel pits on there, and he came up with some numbers, how much more grading, how many more tons of gravel we put on, what do we call them, aggregate haul roads. So it would take a fair bit of work to do it township wide, but the basis of how to calculate that, Steve already has that either up here or somewhere that he knows how to do that.
All right. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Greg.
I was going to save this for later because it's just for my own clarity, but this way I don't have to remember. Paul had asked about when we're getting the funds. Diane had said we get them in one lump sum in third quarter, and then how that impacts with budget, but it's from this year's budget. So we put in our budget a projection of what we anticipate getting, and then we get it in third quarter, and it doesn't impact budget because it goes directly into reserve, but it does a little bit impact how we project what funds are in there for project planning. So we don't get the funds until, so the tonnage, which is self-reported, and then the cents per ton, then the amount we get in third quarter, when do we get told what that amount will be? Do we not know until third quarter, or do we know earlier in the year, but then we don't receive the funds until later? Like, I'm looking at the forecasted budget. So we're saying $650,000 annually, and then it depends on what the extraction for that year would be, whether it's going to be higher or lower. So that's just sort of set as a placeholder that's going to be close-ish, and then it'll either come in higher or lower. Do we not know what that is until we receive the funds, or are we made aware of it in advance of receiving the funds, but then the funds come in third quarter?
So the only reason we pick this up is I look for the report that comes out in August every year. So that gives us what we anticipate getting for this year, but we don't know what's coming next year. It's just a projection. So the 650 that Diane had is actually higher than what it was in the past. I think we were at 600 before that. So if we look at what we can forecast, knowing on what 401 projects are coming up, we could likely say that next year we should get over 700,000. So that would be the best guess estimate.
Any other questions? Just want to point out one thing then before we go on. Oh, I'll wait. I'll read the motion. Moved by Greg, seconded by Stuart, that report 2024-088 from the Chief Administrative Officer be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? I do just want to point out then something that Don mentioned in his response to that question, and that is that these are self-reporting tonnage numbers, right? So this is whoever owns and operates that pit says this is how many tons we took out of there. So there's no independent verification, certainly no verification by the municipality, and no ability for us to verify. They report that to the ministry, and the ministry tells us this is how many tons. They add them up and say this is how many tons we're taking out of your municipality, and therefore this is the money that you're going to get. The township doesn't collect them. This is mostly for any residents. The township does not collect them directly from the pit, and we do not know how many tons they took out of that pit. We're a complete third party to that whole scenario, just to clarify. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we're at 11:02, so if council is okay with it, I'm going to suggest we suspend going through the reports from staff and jump back to Delegation 7C. Sarbjit Singh, Water Control Structures Technologist, Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, Upper Embro Dam Class Environmental Assessment. Sarbjit, I'll ask you to come up and take a seat there. Make sure the little red light on your microphone is on. I believe there's a laptop there if you want to do that, and if it, no, there's not. No laptop there, I forget that. But we will be able to advance that slide for you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Good morning, and thank you, Mayor. I will not need any presentation materials because I don't have any. So I'm just here to provide a summary of what has happened since the last time we met in January. As you recall, in January, we came here with our consultant, and the consultant presented a PowerPoint summary of the findings of the environmental assessment, and they presented all the identified alternative solutions and presented the preferred alternative solution, which is to naturalize the channel by removing the dam and constructing a combination of wetlands or ponds. So since then, one of the things that I would first like to point out is there has been an amendment to the Class EA document. So the previous document from 2013 has been amended since February of this year. We received a briefing on what the amendments are in June. While it does not impact the project significantly in terms of timeline, there are a few minor changes. So one of the changes is that all the ongoing projects which were being undertaken in the previous Class EA, from this point onwards, they will have to comply with the current Class EA. And one of the requirements was when we release our notice of completion, we have to display the report at our office and municipality's office and make it accessible to the public. So we decided that we want to have the report available at our office at 2 branches of the Oxford Library in Ingersoll and Embro. And we also dropped off a copy here in case anybody wants to come here to see. Another change was there was a change in the names of the notices. So previously, the notice that was just sent out, it's called the Notice of Completion of Project Plan. Previously, it would have been called Notice of Filing. There has been a small change in the naming, but doesn't change anything significantly. Another small change is that any addendum, if issued, will add 30 days to the commenting period. So currently, the comment period lasts for 30 days. If there is an addendum, it will add 30 days from that point onwards. So there has to be a minimum of 30-day comment period. There have been some, in the report, as it was presented during the presentation, in the report, in section 8.1, there is a bullet point list of some additional studies that we will have to do before we can proceed with the construction. Before we can proceed with the design, that will go into construction. So some of them will include location of an assessment of shallow water wells, hydrological studies, sediment analysis, environmental screening of aquatic species, bird surveys, and stage 2 archaeological assessment. Another thing that I can mention is regarding funding. We applied for WECI funding to the province for this year and the next year. The WECI funding framework was recently switched from 1 year to 2 year. So we were able to apply for 2 years within this year. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the Embro is going to get funding for these 2 years. So from 24 to 26, there will likely be no funding from the province. So once the study is finalized, there is a time limit for 5 years within which we have to start implementation of the project of the preferred alternative. So if not, there can be an addendum to the report, which is something that we have never done. It needs to be seen how it will be done, but our preference is to have the project implemented, the construction completed within the next 5 years. Currently, we have support from a couple of non-profit organizations, such as Ducks Unlimited and Ontario Rivers Alliance, and we have identified some other possible funding sources. So we don't know the timeline yet, but our preference is to be able to complete the construction in the next 5 years. As you know, we don't have an estimate on the stages for the additional studies and for the design work. We do have an estimate for the construction work, which is about $140,000. That is for year 2 and year 3 after the design is complete. So there are a lot of unknowns at this point. One of them is whenever we do our stage 2 archaeological assessment, we have to involve First Nations, and we will likely have to pay for their involvement at the site. So that depending on how many First Nations will be involved, it will increase the cost. Currently, I have 2 First Nations involved, identified that might be involved or will be interested, possibly 3, but I'm not sure until we get that to that stage. And that's about it. One of the things that I can mention is that we did have some public exposure. Stratford today noticed our tweet on X, and they published an article on their website about the current stage of the Embro Dam EA. And that's about it. I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Questions from council? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, you partially answered a couple of my questions, and one was the WECI funding, and unfortunately, we're not going to get the WECI funding. I think it was, if I remember, like $50,000 this year and $60,000 next year, something like that, if I remember from the last Board of Directors meeting. You did say that the Upper Thames has received some funding from Ducks Unlimited and somebody else, or?
We have not received any funding. We can only approach them for funding once the design work is complete.
Okay.
I am in touch with Phil Holst, who is the director of Ducks Unlimited.
Yeah.
And seems like we have good support. Ontario Rivers Alliance also sent us a letter with a letterhead showing the support for the preferred alternative. But until we get to that design stage, we don't have any written commitment on the funding.
So once we get through the tech design stage, and assuming we get money from Ducks Unlimited and somebody else, can we use that money to proceed with the decommissioning? Okay. So because this project to decommission is not necessarily put on hold because we didn't get WECI funding, as long as we can get funding from somewhere else.
Yes, we still will have access to some funding. We don't know how much we will get. We will have access for funding, not just from the province, but also from non-profit organizations.
Right.
But we can't apply for that until we get to that stage.
Till we do, okay. Because I think personally, I'm frustrated that, every 6 months you have to come back and bring us an update, and it's all part of the process but as far as actually decommissioning the thing, we haven't made any real progress on it. So it's good to hear that there's possibility that we can get funding from somewhere else to actually do the work, because WECI, I think the amount of dollars available through WECI when you spread it over the whole province is almost insignificant.
Yeah, unfortunately this year there was a lot of demand for funding. WECI typically puts more, highest priority on the safety projects. And this year, even some of our safety projects haven't got funded. Yeah. So that shows how much demand there is this year for money. So we just never know. Some years we have high demand, and some years we have money left over, what happened last year. We had actually 3 calls for applications last year because there was just so much money left over, and this year we have probably nothing.
And I went back and I watched the meeting the last time the group was here talking about this, and one of the things we talked about, I believe the stop logs are taken out in the fall and then put back in the spring, but there was some talk at that meeting that they would not be put back in this spring as the very first step of determining where the natural flow was going to go. Do you know whether those stop logs were put back in this spring, or as they normally were, or were they left out?
The stop logs, I think there are currently 2 stop logs there above the sill. So we have not touched the stop logs probably this year at all. So they have been left as it is since last year. The plan is to gradually lower the water level by removing the stop logs. So we want to make sure that we don't have to minimize the cost. We want to use vegetation to stabilize the sediment. So we will, in year 2, we'll probably gradually lower the water level and do some seeding to make sure the sediment stays.
Okay, that's good. So even though we haven't got specific funding, we are in the very, very first stages of actually doing some work on the project.
Yeah, so the scope of the Class EA was just to determine what is the most suitable alternative based on different factors, such as financial. The next stage for us is to figure out how to implement it most effectively by minimizing the cost.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I have a few. Apologize for not asking these in advance, but I frankly didn't think of them until you were just presenting there. The first one I don't think you're probably going to be able to answer today. So this, right now we're applying for WECI funding to remove this dam, essentially. Was that for, actually the first part I think you can answer, that was for 2024, that application, correct? Or for 2025, we applied in 2024 for 2025. Second question is, this dam, when it was put in, was it put in with any provincial funding?
I'm not sure, I don't have any...
Would you be able to find that out for me, for us, for council, for future? And the reason that I asked that is, right now, we, Upper Thames applied for the WECI funding and didn't get it for 2025, and I understand all that. Thank you for that explanation. I'm wondering if the township, in cooperation with Upper Thames, could jointly advocate with our Oxford MPP and or the ministry to say, We'd really like to be getting this in 2026. And part of that ask, I think, should be, so if the province, and I suspect the province did pay at least part of the cost to put the dam in, and then subsequently the province changes regulation, which essentially forces us to take the dam out, why are taxpayers paying to remove a thing that the province wanted put in? I think it would only be fair if the province, did that. And if WECI is existing and funding there, then it may be just a question of not necessarily asking for more money, just moving this project up the list. But the first question there would be, did the province in fact fund any portion of installing it in the first place? But I would offer that out, and I know Councillor Mitchell's on the Board of Upper Thames, and I think we should consider that possibility of that joint advocacy going to MPP Hardeman and saying, we'd really like you to do your part and move this WECI application up the list. If the province wanted the dam there 50 whatever years ago, and now they want it out, happy to have you join us in funding that project to make that happen for residents. So that would be all, really.
Yeah, sure. It will take me some time to dig up the information.
We have until the application window for 2026, essentially. So.
Yes. Yeah. So we can reapply for funding in 2026 for the next 2 years. And if we get it, we get it. If we don't get it, we can look into other options. But I can definitely.
I would just offer that, talk to everybody at Upper Thames. I think we could jointly advocate on that to try and make sure that we're as high up as we can possibly justify on that list of WECI priorities. Anybody else? I don't think I have one for this. We don't need anything. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Sarbjit.
Thank you.
So then we will go back to reports from Corporate and Protective Services Department and 9.4B, Report 2024-085 from the Legislative Coordinator Deputy Clerk regarding 2026 Municipal Election Ward Boundary Review. Not a loaded topic at all. Alicia, I will turn it over to you. Is there anything you want to highlight for Council before I ask them for questions?
No, I'll just leave it open to questions.
Questions for Council on the report? Just wait. Moved by Greg, seconded by Stewart, that Council increase the election reserve funds for 2025 to 2029 from $5,000 to $15,000 annually to fund a consultant to conduct a ward boundary review for the 2030 municipal election or a subsequent election thereafter. Deputy Mayor Greg is the mover. Do you wish to speak to
So I know a couple of years ahead of the last election, we started talking about, wards and potential need for change. A lot of the development that's happened in the municipality impacting population has been centralized in Ward 2. And I think this report did such a great job in breaking down how we organize ourselves for our elections and our representation, where those numbers and thresholds are, addressing where the areas of development have been, and obviously the rate of development is what's impacting when those population thresholds are going to get to what point. I know that this is like a highly kind of controversial and politicized topic, but I think the report does such an excellent job of detailing how we can approach this type of decision, and I'm in strong support of option 3 recommended in the report. I think it would be premature of us to do this work now at our current population numbers, and then looking forward to 2023 or potentially beyond, I think is how the motion reads, to do that review appropriately at that time and to start making those contributions to the reserve so that when the time comes that we have the funds to conduct that review properly.
Councillor Stewart is the seconder. Councillor Mitchell.
I didn't have any questions, but I do have a fair number of comments on it, and I want to agree with the Deputy Mayor about the quality of the report and giving us the background and how council and the system has evolved over the years and the challenges going forward. But I do agree that we shouldn't make any changes for the 2026 election. 2 years ago, I thought that at this point we would be looking at some changes to the structure of the council and the ward system. I thought at the time our decision to elect as a council a deputy mayor for a 4-year term rather than splitting it up between the 4 councilors for 1 year each, I thought that was a move in the right direction, and I saw that as a tradition or a transition move towards having a township-wide elected deputy mayor and moving to a 3-ward system, which would address some of the numbers issues that would come up. But I think population growth in Thamesford has not been as quick as certainly I anticipated. We do have a whole row of townhouses built, but as far as the development of the Maple Leaf property, that hasn't materialized as quite as quickly as at least I thought it would at this point. And when I talk about the 3-ward system, what I'm going to suggest is that we would go to an East Ward, a West Ward, and a Thamesford Ward as the 3 wards. And that it would make sense that we use the existing boundary, which is 31st line, and just put it straight down the length of the township. And that would result in that Ward 1, which would be the former Ward 4, Crystal's ward, and Ward 3, which is my existing ward, would have somewhere between 2,200 and 2,400 electors. If you figured that kind of split Kevin's ward, the numbers up in between the two of us, which kind of lines up where Thamesford's numbers would be, maybe not by 2030, but certainly 2034, that we would have 3 wards basically of same size population, same number of electors, and that we would, the mayor and the deputy mayor would be elected township-wide. But I also want to, it was mentioned in the report, I also want to make my strong support that we keep the ward system, because the other alternative is that the whole entire council be elected township-wide. And I think there's 3 reasons that it's important that we have the ward system. And it was mentioned in the report about communities of interest. And I think number 1 reason is that residents want a local representative, whether they know us personally, they know of us. Whereas county-wide, there's a potential of more disconnect between that person that represents them and the individual resident. The second is campaigning township-wide would be a discouragement for councillor candidates, especially the rural area. There would be increased costs for pamphlets, signs, and transportation, and especially increased time and effort to door knock. And at any level of government, they'll tell you the best way to campaign is to knock on doors and to meet people. Well, that's relatively easy in Thamesford and Embro and my big municipality of Kintore. You can just park your vehicle and walk down the street and knock on doors, and you can meet a lot of people. But when you're campaigning out in the country, you drive down the road, you pull in the laneway, you check to see if there's going to be a dog eat you, get out of your vehicle, go up, knock on the door. If you're maybe talk to somebody, maybe you leave your pamphlet, you get back in your vehicle, you drive out the laneway, up the road, in another, and keep doing it. I knocked on 711 doors when I ran, and it took me weeks to do that. So when, just from a financial perspective, none of us are here to get rich, not even the mayor. But when you combine the salary for the mayor, this council, and the fact that he also collects a salary, he or she collects a salary on county council, there's a fair compensation there. But to have to campaign township-wide for a council seat that pays less than $20,000, you really want to be on council to go through that, to have a fair campaign. And the third problem with getting rid of the ward system is it's entirely possible that the entire council could live in Embro or Thamesford because of a lack of rural candidates, as I just talked about. And even if they don't live even if you have rural candidates, you would have to do what they call at the federal and provincial level is of voter efficiency. Where are you going to get the most votes out? So if you can campaign in Thamesford and Embro and get 1,000 votes, or campaign in all the back roads and get 300 votes, if you have a limited amount of time to campaign, where are you going to spend your time? So who is more likely to vote? It's the person that had somebody knock on their door and had that personal connection. Those are the people that are going to be electing the next council. So if you have a council that's entirely made up of people from one or two areas as opposed to spread out across as we are, first of all, the perception is bad for residents, because the perception is going to be, well, Embro and Thamesford are going to get everything because that's where the council lives. And there's also the potential that the governance is not going to be so good as I like to think that we do, because the people that live in the rural areas have different priorities and different life stories and life histories than people that live in the urban areas. And I know I'm totally biased on this, but I think it's important to have a farmer on council, because it is our biggest industry. It takes up by far the largest percentage of our land mass. So I think it's important that we keep the ward system in place for those reasons I mentioned. Now, I realize that if council agrees with the report that we keep the status quo, that the next council will have all the things I just talked about to consider. But there's no guarantee I'm going to be on next council, so I want to take this opportunity to put my 5 cents out due to inflation.
Anyone else? I'm not going to, I think the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Mitchell spoke to all the points. I think it's an excellent report. I absolutely agree. I was sure that this term we were going to be doing this. I've been bugging staff for quite a while to see, like, when's this report coming? When's this report coming? But excellent report. Couldn't agree more with the report and the comments. And I think it's a good analysis. I think the one thing I would add is I think we need to back up a little bit and always remind ourselves that this is a representative democracy. So everything we do in this room is predicated on our residents feeling like they are actually and fairly represented when we're in here, right? I mean, that's the only validity behind any of the decisions that we make. So we really have to take this stuff seriously, because literally you could make a strong argument that a municipal act aside, that everything that we do as a township flows from this kind of document that says how will our residents be represented and their taxes decided and their services decided. So I don't think we should take this lightly at all. I'm not suggesting that we have, but I think, yeah, it'll be up to the council of the day to do this work. But I think this is the right thing to do, is to set that money aside, and then that council will have appropriate budget to decide how they want to spend it to do this right and decide how residents are going to be represented in the future. So, but I think all the points that you made were the right ones for residents to hear. Anyone else before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9.4C, Report 2024-092 from the Corporate and Strategic Initiatives Coordinator and the Manager of Finance regarding grant policy updates. Maggie, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions? I guess, Maggie, yeah.
No, I'll leave it open for questions.
Questions from council on the report? Councilor Mitchell.
For discussion purposes, can we kind of break this down into the three different policies, because there's really three different.
You can break it down however you want.
Okay. Well, I don't have any questions on the cemetery policy. I'm glad that we separated it out, and I've said multiple times before, we are fortunate that many of our cemeteries are run by volunteer boards, and that if we can help these volunteer organizations keep going by putting in a few $1,000s a year towards their operations, and I think that's a no-brainer to do that, because if these boards weren't there, it would fall back on the municipality to operate and maintain the cemeteries, and I don't think that if we had to pay staff to do it, it would be as financially prudent as the system that we have now. So that's my comments on that policy. If anybody else.
We can do it. We'll do it, like you said, we'll do the comments on each one if you want.
What's that?
We'll break it down if you want.
Yeah, if anybody else has on that one. But
Any other comments? Questions? We don't have a motion on the floor yet. All right. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that council approve the recommended changes made to policies 500-03 and 500-06, and that the proposed 500-10 Community Partnership Program capital project policy be approved and incorporated into the annual budget process. And that the following be added to 500-10, 9.1 funding. A, the township contribution towards capital projects will be a maximum of 30% of the final capital project cost based on the submitted budget for the project. B, the township contribution of 30% will have a maximum dollar value stipulated when council approves in principle to move ahead with the project. Councillor Mitchell is the mover.
yeah, I asked to have this wording changed in the community grants policy, and this policy, I believe, is new, but it just codifies what has evolved over the last 7 or 8 years, as starting with the Water and Wheels project in Thamesford, and going through the splash pad in Embro, the pavilion in Embro, the A.J. Baker playground equipment. What's one? There's another one I'm missing. Another big project that we. Oh, the committee you're on. The multiple. Yeah. And so what has evolved is that we would give that the township would support 30%. The proponent would provide 70% of the funding. But a key point of that policy and was in the motions that I drafted was that there be a dollar figure attached to that 30/70 as a maximum number, for a couple of reasons. One was it made clear when we approved a project in principle to the proponents that this is exactly how many dollars you've got to work with. And that did two things. I think it made the proposals, the budgeting for the proposals, a lot better, because when they came to us, they knew that they couldn't come back to us later if need be for more money. And the other part of it was that when the project was approved in principle, the proponents knew exactly how many dollars, either in monetary value or services in kind, they were going to get from the township. And if once they got the project budgeted out, or they knew what their total costs were going to be, then if it was going to be over budget, then the proponents had the option of either raising more money or downsizing the project. So I didn't see that in the policy, that dollar figure. I think it's an important part of the policy. So that's why I asked that the amendments be made, or the change in wording, and was included in a motion.
Councillor Finch is the seconder. Any other discussion? Deputy Mayor Gregg.
I just have a quick question for staff in relation to the change recommendation. Do staff foresee any concern in relation to Councillor Mitchell's proposed policy amendment?
The only question I have is that you may have a proposed project that is a couple years ahead of actually completing the funding. So at the time that the project is developed, there's a set price, you have an estimated price for that project. As the project increases, so 2 years later, 3 years later, the project has come back and the cost has increased. Now, normally, as a budget process, we add that project every year with the idea it's going to be completed. It could be that year or the next year, all depends when the funding has been completed. So if it comes back and it's has gone up in price due to the cost of materials or labor, whatever, is staff able to bring that project back to that next year at that increased value? Or are you stipulating in this policy it has to be at the time the project was first initiated and the estimate completed at that time?
So the calculation of the dollar value is based on the budgeted amount that's given to us when the proponent asks us to support it in principle. I think if there was unusual circumstances like another pandemic or where we saw things go crazy price-wise, I think there's always the opportunity for the proponent to come back to council and plead their case under that circumstances. But I think it's important that we have that dollar figure in there so that everybody knows and what the township is, what the max they're going to put in, unless we have a very unusual situation. And even, you know, with your committee, on your fundraising thermometer, it says the number's right there. Everybody knows that's what the dollar is going forward. And your committee is one that has kind of dragged out for a couple of years, so it is being impacted by that.
Just before I go to you, just for clarity, I want to make sure, because council's going to pass a resolution, and the resolution is the resolution. I want to make sure we're all of the same understanding of it. So I think the relevant portion here would be, and correct me if I'm wrong as the mover, would be B, the township contribution of 30% will have a maximum dollar value stipulated when council approves in principle to move ahead with the project. I think my understanding, tell me as the mover and tell me as the staff who would have to implement it, would be that if that project was $100,000 at the time that it was approved in principle, that the township would be allocating $30,000.00 to that project, and that would be that, unless, you know, council decided something otherwise. That's your intention?
That's exactly, that we identify a maximum dollar figure, and unless something very unusual happens, that's what the proponents have to work with, so they know, okay, it's 100,000. We're getting 30,000 either in monetary or services in kind, and we're on the hook for the other 70. If it comes in at over 100, then we're on the hook for that, or we can scale it back so that it fits in our budget. That's up to the proponent working with our staff to determine that. But I think for clarity and for budgeting purposes, having a dollar figure rather than just saying it's 3070 is an important thing. And that's what we've done on at least the last 4 projects, and it's worked out very well.
Does that, Deputy Mayor?
Okay, so thank you for clarification on that. I will support this modified, well, I guess it's not a modified motion. I will support this motion as Councillor Mitchell has designated that. I know that Councillor Mitchell has put significant efforts into the motions that he's put forward in relation to these projects so that we have clarity as a budgeting tool for both the proponents as well as council and staff so that we know the financial implications of these collaborative projects. But early in my first term of council, some advice that I got from the mayor was to do this job with the intention of eliminating the need for you to be the one doing the job. So I think while you've written very detailed motions in the past, trying to get that into policy, so if you're not in that seat in the future, that approach is still how these projects are carried out. I appreciate the budget. The assumption that the number in the budget will not be changing with inflation or duration of project. The initial budgeting done by whether it be the Lions Club or a committee of council set up to do this work, it motivates some good budget strategy. But again, for the multi-use courts project, there was some inflated dollars built into it because we knew it was going to be a couple years out. Having that 30% have a maximum dollar value, I do believe has been a motivator for committee members and community groups to get that funding in place because it's only getting more expensive. And if the township's going to pick up that inflated 30%, I don't think it helps motivate groups to get that fundraising done. So there's an added benefit that way. This is the policy, right? So that doesn't mean that proponents or groups couldn't come back to council and say, listen, there's been this, absurd inflation and we might lose this project, and would you consider increasing the 30% to capture this inflated amount? Council of the day can have that conversation. But the policy framework, having that cap dollar value put on it, I think is a good budgeting tool. So I'll be in supporting motion.
So first I want to clarify that I wasn't suggesting that you eliminate the need for you personally to do the job, just that a councillor. Question for staff though, that the deputy mayor just touched on. So because inflation's a real thing. So if we approve a project that we think isn't going to happen, for 2 years, say, would the estimating of the cost of that project include that? Because that would be my concern. I agree with the principle of this entirely. But my concern would be that we say, oh, well, we estimated it in 2024 and it was going to be $100,000, therefore it's $30,000. But it was never going to happen until 2026 and we didn't include inflation. And of course it goes up. So I guess my question would be, would part of the estimation of the cost of the project be that, okay, we're considering this in 2024, but it's actually going to be constructed in 2026. Do we apply an inflation thing? Because my concern then would be, does every project necessarily come back for council to consider a second time? Okay, now that we're going to actually do it, I mean, I know we consider those things when we do normal budgeting. Would that be part of this process?
That's what staff recommendation would be. Yes, it would, because we do it on our projects within our 10-year capital plan. So I do the same thing for any projects completed by committees.
So just follow up then. So the maximum dollar value stipulated when council approves in principle would include some appropriate consideration of inflation for whenever the project was going to get done. So the 2024 cost is $100,000, therefore $30,000, except we project it's going to be in 2026, so we say it's going to be $105,000. And okay,
correct.
And the multi-use courts project, I think, is a great example of that because, I mean, it started years ago, but those initial projections, those conversations and the work that staff did on that did build in inflation with an anticipation of construction costs rising. What the committee and staff are looking at now is that we're acknowledging that there's likely to be further inflation, but until we get our fundraising dollar value closer to our targeted budget amount, to redo that work to look at how much it's going to cost in today's value is a bit premature. So I think this is already reflecting, like staff have already had a practice of anticipating timeline and building in some of that inflation. And then I think this is also when the conversation with the Water and Wheels Committee when there was a gap in fundraising when they went to tender their project, and then who's going to fund that gap. I think this detail also provides some clarity that the policy says that that gap would then be filled by the proponent, and if they're looking to do anything different, they can come make a delegation to council, and council of the day can say we'll split it or not. But there's not just this assumption that they're going to eat that 30% of the inflated cost because that's what's in policy. Right? So it makes it a council conversation. And then all of my speaking has been around the specific piece of your motion that you've added in to provide further clarity. But everything else in this report, I also just, it's so encouraging, because I love policy. It's so encouraging to see the evolution, you know, I think sitting here in a second term, to not just, you know, these are the rules and this is how we do things here so that we can all live, work, play in a, you know, in a cohesive way. But to see that as we grow and change, that policy grows and change, and that policy really is that living document that needs to be constantly reviewed and updated. It's really cool to see the quality staff that we have identify gaps in policy that have come up through experiences that they've been navigating, you know, working the front end of our municipal operations. So the changes that are being proposed here, I think, are just such a strong testament to the ability that our staff have to respond to the needs of the municipality of Zorra.
Diane, and then Councillor Mitchell.
Another staff question, just to be clear, if there is a, if the project doesn't use the full funds that have been budgeted for it, I just want to clarify, is the split still 70-30 on the actual dollars spent?
Can I just get you asked that again? I want to.
So if your project is 125,000 budgeted, but they only spent 100,000, is the 30-70 split just on this 100,000 then?
Councillor Mitchell.
That's the intention. That and the wording is to a maximum. So if the project actually comes in under, our funding is 30%, and that also encourages the proponent to stay within a reasonable budget. If they can find savings, then not only do they not have to fundraise as much, but every taxpayer in the township benefits from that potential savings.
So I'm just going to read the portion that I think is relevant here and make sure that it's clear to staff, because I'm always aware that once we pass this, council's not in the room to write the policy and isn't here 3 years from now to implement it. So I think the relevant portion, correct me if I'm wrong here as the mover, Paul, it would be A, the township contribution towards capital projects will be a maximum of 30% of the final capital project cost based on the submitted budget for the project. So that's your intention? Is that your understanding then, Diane? Okay. Everybody else is? Okay. Councilor Mitchell.
Now, the motion, I believe, is that we are adopting all three of these policies?
That is the motion.
Yeah.
I read this once,
yeah.
right? So it's on the floor, and I will read it again before, but yes,
okay.
that's...
But I do have a comment on the, I think we're calling it the community partnership. There was one area in there that I emailed with Diane. I thought there was possibly a loophole or a crack in the policy where a group that wasn't based in Zorra Township, because one of the criteria was must be Zorra based. So criteria number 3, that policy must be Zorra based. But then further down it talks about sponsorship and advertising, and it says must be based in or connected to the Township of Zorra. So the way I read that was that a group that wasn't Zorra based could qualify for money as long as it was a sponsorship. So if they were putting on an event and we were putting money towards sponsoring that and we're getting advertising back for it, they would qualify. But a group that wasn't Zorra based and was applying for money to operate would not qualify. And what concerned me was that for many years we have granted the St. Mary's Mobility Service $1,000 for operating expenses. That's a very valuable service for people in the north end of the township. I felt that the way it was worded, that would slip through the cracks. And Diane, I think, changed the wording by like 3 words to cover that. So if I don't have that change in front of me, but I know you do.
And it's a great catch. Thank you very much. So the idea is that to enable Zorra residents the capability to enjoy all available services in and around their community or outside their community. And we would like to help endorse and assist those partners where possible. So the idea is to just change it to read the organization/committee shall be a Zorra-based community group or service to the Zorra community. And that hopefully will help capture any services that our residents are also being able to enjoy that are outside the municipality. Now also, we will also be talking to each of these groups, because now as we're talking about it, and some of these grants that are coming forward, a lot of them are just a sponsorship. So I think the outside agencies are often not looking for a grant, they're looking for sponsorships for their projects. And our names and our township is listed within their brochure or something like that. So we can just have those discussions with the various groups that are outside our township and just fit them in the correct criteria.
And to what Diane just said, another option for the mobility service, rather than an operating grant, is they have an option to sponsor a vehicle, which would have our logo on the vehicle.
Which we should absolutely do anyway, since we give them that money. I think that every time I see that bus, and thank you for bringing that up, because I always think I should say to Al, we should give you a sticker and you should stick it on that bus.
Yep. So that's another option to look at. My question, I guess, to Karen is, do we now need to modify the motion to include that change in wording, because we're approving these policies as
That's what we're just talking about there. So I think whichever one it is, 06, it needs to say then, and 500-06 as amended. To capture those changes, because otherwise it'll be 500-6 that's in the agenda.
You don't have to put the amendment, even like, I think it's like 3 or 4 words that
as amended.
Close that crack.
Unless, as amended. So can I have a mover to add after 500-06 as amended? Councilor Mitchell.
Move that.
Seconder, I think I saw Councilor Finch's hand up. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councilor Mitchell.
Not on the amendment, but just, sorry, I know what. We'll vote on the amendment, then I have one last comment. Okay. I want to stay on the line. Don't want to cross any lines here. Not this close to lunch.
All those in favor of the amendment to add as amended after 500-06? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay.
And my final comment is awesome work by Maggie. I know her name was on it, but I'm sure that Diane and lots of other staff contributed. And I agree with the deputy mayor. Life is so much easier and is a lot less work for us if the policies are there that staff can tell people this is what it is. If you don't like it, you can go to council, but this is the rules we work under. And especially all the work on this was excellently done, but especially putting that 3070 capital thing, making that after 5 or 6 years where we struggled with everyone that came forward to us, having that policy in that's going to make everything so much easier going forward.
Anyone else? A couple things for me, briefly. I really agree with the comments about that this should be policy. I think the main reason for me that it should be policy, though, is because then it's just completely transparent to residents who gets grants, how they get them, how big they are. Resident asked us, I got a project, I want to get it. We just send them, there's a link, phone staff, there's a policy, there you go, away you go. You're going to get access exactly the same way that everybody else does. And if you don't like it, then as you said, go to council and ask for different than that. I think that's the main thing for me, is it should be way faster. I found myself saying this to people several times this week, is if you want to slow things down, get the politicians involved. If you want it to be fast, just go directly to the staff. And this is what this policy change will do. Will enable staff to just say, you do or you don't qualify, here's how that's going to go, and away you go. So that's a good thing. I think that was it. Anybody else? Okay, so the amended motion then. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Finch, that council approve the recommended changes made to policies 500-03 and 500-06 as amended, and that the proposed 500-10 Community Partnership Program Capital Project Grant Policy be approved and incorporated into the annual budget process, and that the following be added to 500-10. 9.1 funding. A, the township contribution towards capital projects will be a maximum of 30% of the final capital project cost based on the submitted budget for the project. B, the township contribution of 30% will have a maximum dollar value stipulated when council approves in principle to move ahead with the project. Is there any other discussion? I remembered the thing that I was going to say. Because I know we've had discussions before, but should the township be funding 100% of these projects if it's a recreation project or something like that, because we provide recreation services. But I think the deputy mayor made a good point years ago saying that when the community raises that money themselves, there is, you could easily make the case that it's all the same dollars from a whole bunch of residents, and it's more efficient and effective if the township just raises it through taxes and does it. But I think that it's a really good point that the community feels a particular sense of ownership and investment in that project when they went around to the community and justified the project and raised the dollars. And much as I love municipal government, I think everybody should care about it. The reality is people care way more if their neighbor comes to them and says, I want to do a pavilion, will you give me $5? Than if council says, I'm going to forcibly take a quarter out of your wallet and do this project. So while it might be more efficient, I think our residents feel more invested in it, and in the end, that's the goal. So I think this is the right thing to do. Councillor Mitchell.
And sometimes we get councillors out of these projects as well.
On more than one occasion. Anyone else before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So I think, is lunch ready now? Lunch is ready. I'm going to suggest we break here and come back for 10 and on after break. So what time do we want to come back at? 12:30? Half an hour? 12:30. 12:43, I'll call the meeting back to order after lunch, and we are at item 10, correspondence requiring direction. And 2 items of correspondence and separate motions for each. So for item 10A, Community Schools Alliance call for nominations, I believe the deadline has expired. So the motion here is moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that correspondence from the Community Schools Alliance be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? I will tell you, the position that I am on, like there's several different years of positions, so that we did that when we did the Constitution, so you didn't end up in an election year with the whole executive being out and no continuity there. So the term that I'm on right now, I think ends, I can't remember, next year or the year after. So I am still there for Zorra. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 10B, correspondence from Bryan Petrie, Chair of the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority regarding freezing development and application fees for conservation authorities. Is there any questions for staff before I read the motion that you have provided? Questions aren't out of order once the motion is on the floor anyway, but moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that the Township of Zorra Council requests to reverse the decision by the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry of Ontario to freeze the fees conservation authorities can charge in regard to planning, development, and permitting fees, and that the freeze be lifted, and that Council supports the correspondence from Bryan Petrie, Chair, Upper Thames River Conservation Authority regarding reversing the direction or to freeze the fees for planning, development, and permitting for conservation authorities. Councillor Mitchell, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, I think the 2 letters that were in the agenda are pretty self-explanatory, and they've been several months since the board decided to take this action. What has happened is that the province has frozen development charges, development fees, what the Upper Thames can charge to review proposals and all the work that's involved there for initially 1 year, and they extended it to 2 years, and with the way these things happen, it could be extended and on. That's because it's good politics, they think. And at the same time, they've tightened up the timelines that the Upper Thames has to approve applications with penalties attached if they're don't meet those guidelines. And so Upper Thames staff, we've had to hire more staff to accommodate this workload, but we can't recoup the costs of it. And at the same time, by segmenting into the 3 categories, meant that we've also had to for the services and programs, which I've talked about multiple times, they've also segmented our budget. So in the past, if we had an area where we were recovering our cost recovery and had a few dollars extra, we could move that over to another area where we were short of funds. Now we can't. And the one area where we are short of funds is the mandatory area that the development review comes under. And so the only way we can cover those extra costs as an Upper Thames Conservation Authority is either take it out of reserves, which our reserves are getting depleted, or increase the municipal levy, which eventually, as the letter says, comes back to increased taxes. So what ends up is that the people that are benefiting, which is the developers, are not paying. The taxpayers of the municipalities, and especially the more rural municipalities, are paying for development in the City of London, essentially. So the board has endorsed asking for this freeze to be lifted, and one of the few powers we have is to get the municipalities to back us up on that, and that's the whole purpose behind that. So that's why it's come to each of the municipalities.
Deputy Mayor is the seconder. Anyone else? I would just have a question. It says that Council supports the correspondence. Mayor, Chair Petrie has talked to me about this several times. I'm very supportive of it. In terms of supports, like how much latitude would you be willing to give me in terms of supporting the chair and in doing this in terms of talking to MPPs and ministers? Generally.
Personally, I think whatever you consider reasonable is.
That's just what I wanted to.
Yeah.
Since it wasn't explicit in it, I just wanted to ask the question.
No, and I think that was left specifically like that to give some because different mayors, different municipalities are going to approach it differently. So.
Yep, great. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And boards and committees, 2 items, A and B.
Just as a follow-up, can we have staff notify the Upper Thames that,
they will.
that we have approved that?
Yeah. Okay. And 2 items under 11, A and B, and I have a motion to receive and file both. Does anybody want to do anything different than that? Moved by Greg, seconded by Stewart, that items 11A and B be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And then 12, information items. So some of these have been broken out, so I don't think I have one for 12A. No. Oh, is there? Oh, I got it. Okay, thank you. So I have moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that items 12A to C and F be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? Oh. Yep. It says A-C. Now it says and C. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that items 12A and C and F be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? Deputy Mayor Grigg. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 12B, moved by Finch, seconded by Mitchell, that council support the correspondence from Colin Best, President, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, regarding AMO advocacy on homelessness encampments, and that this resolution be forwarded to local MP, MPP, and AMO. Councillor Finch is the mover. Do you wish to speak to that?
I just think it's important for us to show support for AMO's advocacy. Last year at AMO, I went for a study tour to the Mental Health and Addiction Crisis Center in London, and I thank them for setting up that tour because it was really awesome, and I think everybody should take a chance to go on a tour and see what it is that these residents in our community actually do need.
Councillor Mitchell is the seconder.
Yeah, we've talked in the past about how municipalities are spending funds on responsibilities that are not municipal responsibilities because the feds and the province are not have downloaded those responsibilities either officially or unofficially, and that the municipalities are spending money on things that the property tax system was never designed to fund. And so any lobbying that we can do through Roma or AMO to point that out to the province is, I think it should be something we support.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 12D. Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that council direct staff to contact Minister of Energy and Electrification Stephen Lecce to inquire about a groundbreaking ceremony for the 0.95 megawatt Bolton Manor Rural Power Resiliency Project. Councillor Stewart as the mover. Councillor Grigg, Deputy Mayor Grigg, sorry. Anyone else? Can I suggest that maybe I think staff would do this anyway, but I think first we should contact Bolton Manor. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I brought this up at a gender review yesterday because I think this is like a potentially really, this is a great news project, right? It's agriculture turning waste into energy. It's in line with many, many strategic goals. It's part of our main, as Councillor Mitchell mentioned earlier, part of our main economic sector and land use in Zorra Township. This is like all the things. A private business stepping up and saying they want to do a thing. I think we should really try and take advantage of it. Whether he comes or not, I don't know, but I think it would be good, given that he sent us the letter, to offer that invite if Bolton Manor is up for it. So, any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 12E, moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that staff be directed to prepare a report regarding potential impacts of the creation of a new temporary subclass for aggregate properties. Councillor Stewart, as the mover, do you wish to speak to that?
No, I don't know much about this. I think it's hard to really establish any kind of opinion unless we get some opinions from staff. So I agree with that.
Deputy Mayor Grigg is the seconder. Anyone else? So question for staff then, do we have an idea of what this report might look like? Can we do it, and when might we get it?
As we work with TAPMO on this matter, we should get some more information within the next several weeks. So I would say probably the second meeting in September.
Okay. I mean, I would have been fine with October or November, but sure, second meeting in September. Too late. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. No unfinished business, no notices of motion, bylaws, and then the calendar. Yeah. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that bylaws 39-24, 40-24, and 41-24 be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And items of community interest. Councillor Finch.
August 12th to 16th, Embro Vacation Bible School is happening, and you can register up till the morning of. August 10th, there's an open house at the Harrington Gristmill, 11 to 3. And August 16th, Beachville District Historical Society is doing their annual summer beef barbecue, 5 to 7. th 5 to 7.
An amendment to the Harrington Mill Open House. There also will have a petting farm adjacent to the Harrington Hall from 12 to 1:30, and there'll be lunch available for purchase at a reasonable price. On what's that?
If you say it's reasonable, then I mean it's got.
It's actually cheap. Sunday, August the 18th at Brown's United Church is the Canada Food Grains Pig and Corn Roast. It's by donation. Bring a salad or dessert. The corn and the pork is supplied. It starts at 5:15 p.m. And Thursday, September the 5th is the annual Uniondale Firefighters Chicken Barbecue. Chicken prepared and served by the heroes of North Oxford. And pick up at the fire hall between 4:30 and 7. Tickets are $25 each. You can meet the latest Uniondale hero, yes.
On Sunday, August 25th, there's another one of the community car shows at Beachville District Museum. It runs from 11 till 4. Car shows welcome anytime after 9:30.
Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that bylaw 42-24, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held August 7th, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time this August 7th, 2024. And further, that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 12:57 p.m. And the next meeting of the council will be called for September 4th, 2024 at 9:30 a.m. in the council chambers at the Zorra Municipal Center. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?